Hey, good evening, everyone. We are discussing a topic which I decided to call Tikkun Journeys. So it's a little bit of a lead on from last week, but we'll give enough background so that you could get it even without that. I'll probably need. Actually, no, I should be okay. Um, Okay, so good evening, everyone. I hope you enjoy noodles and rice and seconds and thirds. As I mentioned, there's a vegetarian option at the end. There's spiciness interspersed throughout. And again, just our usual apologies to the Zoom audience, but it's very nice. As long as you should know that it's very nice. Okay, so yeah, basically, so what we're talking about today is Tikkun Journeys. So the idea of the basic idea is there's something called Tikkun Olamot, that there's this idea that we are meant to make the world a better place. We have a purpose. We have a purpose in being here. God created us, and He created us in an imperfect environment. That the world was not really created in a complete sense. It was created almost, and then God says, "I'm calling upon you guys to complete the work of creation. I want you to partner with me and take the world from what is to what it ought to be." And that's really the general thing that we're always going to be coming back to here. And we'll go into all different kinds of interesting details, but that's really the thing that we're coming back to, is trying to make the world a better place. And that being a purpose that we have and really something that we can achieve. In terms of what we discussed last time, we discussed, and that's our little diagram at the top over here, is that the world is a little bit bigger than we're used to thinking about. When I think about the world, I think about what I can see around me, maybe what I can see in a telescope, and even, that which is beyond that. But even beyond the universe as we know it, that's still at the end of the day a physical universe. There are spiritual realms above, many spiritual realms above that. And so just we said it's on the sheet here if you want the little diagram, if it helps you. If not, don't worry. But the realm that we find ourselves in is called Asiya. And that is the realm, the realm of action and practicality that we kind of live in a day-to-day basis. Above that is the Olam HaYetzira, the world of Yetzira, which is where the angels, the Malachim, reside. And then above that, we have a realm, we're climbing levels of spirituality as we go. So then above that, we have the realm of Bria, which is where the neshamas reside, where the souls reside before they come into the body, after they leave the body, waiting for Tchiyat HaMeitim. So that's a realm which is even higher than the angels. And then all the way at the top of the system as we know it, maybe we'll see something higher today, but there's something called Atzilut, which is basically a purely divine realm. It's only God and only godliness in that realm. So you basically, the truth is, we think there's us and then there's God, and it's just kacha, that's just how it is. But no, there's actually a system. There's a system to all this up. Just as there's a physical geography, there's also a spiritual geography, and there's a way that that the world works, not just in a physical sense, but also in a metaphysical sense. And there's systems to all these things. And again, which we'll just keep emphasizing, is that in as much as this is this is the big picture of the world, but at the end of the day, it's always going to come back to what's going on down here. What's going on down here is going to be the trigger of what's going to be going on in the rest of the world. And to the on the other side, what's going on, if there's some kind of tikkun, some kind of amelioration, a building, a healing, which is occurring in some higher world, there'll always be a trickle down effect, and we'll always see a better world down here as a result of whatever is going on up there. So what we said last time, and this will bring us into today, is that, okay, so how do I do that? How do I have some kind of relationship with these higher realms? How do I do something positive for these worlds which are spiritual? How can I do that? I can barely do something for myself in this world. So how can I do that? So the answer is because we have a soul, and our soul also has a complex anatomy to it. Just as there's physical anatomy, there's also spiritual anatomy, and there's a correspondence between the levels of our soul and these worlds that we see. The lowest part of our soul is called our nefesh, which corresponds to our actions. So when we do good actions, it's going to have a positive effect in the world of asiya. So not only even just the interaction that you actually have with, let's say, another person, but even beyond that, you actually have a kind of spiritual impact in, this world that we see. That's when we do good things. When in terms of dibur, so when we are speaking, so that's relating to the world of Yetzira. So already there, when we're saying something which is a positive thing, you're saying a compliment to someone. We'll give an example soon. But yeah, you say compliments, so you say something not to encourage someone. Actually, it was quite interesting. I was going to say a rabbi. It's not a rabbi. That's the whole point. He was a psychiatrist. Dr. Jakob Freeman, anyone know this? Heard of him? So he just came to speak here like an hour ago. And yeah, he was saying like one of the really important things that we should be doing for our society, to our children, to the people we meet, is think about who we praise. Who do we like to speak about? So he said, is what who do we like to speak about? We like to speak about celebrities. Even within the kind of more, Haredi world, they like to speak about the rich people, the person who's spending this money on this and this money on that. That's what we're tempted to speak about. But who should we be speaking about? We should be speaking about simple people who are trying hard in life and who are good, decent individuals. And he said, if we were to do that, that would take a lot of pressure off our children and off ourselves in society. Because when we kind of, like to speak about people who have lots of money or, an insane ability for learning or anything like that, that's not really attainable. That's not really something that I can relate to. So I'm going to kind of be idolizing this thing my whole life that I can't actually do. In contrast, if you talk about something which is about being a decent person, and we praise that, so that's something which is kind of attainable. So anyway, that was his take. But the point is to, for example, things like that, speaking about things which are healthy for our, society. So that can also be something which is positive speech. What are you doing there? In addition to doing good stuff for the society, you're also making tikkunim in the realm of Yetzirah. We're bringing light into that spiritual olam, to that spiritual realm. Then moving on to Bria, that's what we use our thoughts for. So we have our nefesh, which is our actions, which is bringing light into Asiya. We have our ruach, which is our speech, bringing light into the realm of Yetzirah. We have our thoughts, which is our neshama. So we sometimes use the word neshama in a general way to refer to the soul in general, but if we're specific, it actually refers to that one of the higher elements of the soul, which corresponds to our thoughts and our intellect. So when we're using that for good, so we're bringing light even into the world of Bria. So Brian and I were just having a conversation earlier, and we were thinking about giving someone the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they did something which was like not so enjoyable for us, but then we were thinking, oh, he didn't really mean it. He's kind of stressed and, things like that. So doing things, having these thought experiments to try and give someone the benefit of the doubt, that's something which could bring light into the world of Bria. And finally, this realm of Atzilut, so even it's a little hard, even if the rest we were on board with, even this one's a little harder for us to believe that we could bring something positive to a divine realm. That's where God is. And yet there are certain things that we can even do which will interact with that realm. So we'll discuss that today. But that was that was an hour and 5 minutes. That's what we discussed last time. And the bottom line of it all is basically that with everything we do, so it's big lofty stuff, but really the truth is with everything just that we do in our daily life, we can have these very, very positive effects on the world. Just speaking and doing things and thinking, we can actually have this positive effect on the world and bringing light into the world around us. So that's really the backbone of everything that we'll discuss today as well. What do you think, Jay?
How does that help the world? All the things that you talk about are spiritual.
Right.
But how do you actually help the world?
So the way that it works is that what goes on in the world around us, as we see, is a reflection of what's going on in the higher worlds. It's a little bit like it's kind of like a company in many ways. Like, if you have like let's say if you have like a very general way, you have good management, so generally there'll be good work going on the ground. And if you have good if it's too cold, I can also adjust the you can adjust it if you want. There's a remote over there. It's up to you, up to you. I'm not I didn't grow up with air conditioning. We lived in Scotland, so it's not irrelevant. Yeah. So what were you going to say? So how does that? So you have, good management, then you usually have good work going down on the ground. If you have often a good CEO, then that can set a culture for the organization. And the same is true, of course, in the opposite. You have kind of like a toxic culture at the top. So that usually is felt down at the bottom. It's just by way of analogy, but that's actually the way that the world's run in a spiritual sense. So if we are bringing light into these higher realms, so that's reflected down here. So you bring you do a tikkun in the realm of Bria. Okay, so what does that do for me in the moment? Okay, it's true you're making the world a better place, although I can't really sense that necessarily. But at the end of the day, there will be something which will be good, which will come from that down here. For example, it could go to a particular individual who's having a hard day, and all of a sudden, sometimes you just like felt better, you're not really sure why. Sometimes you like do stuff to feel better, and sometimes you just it's feeling better. Like, so that could be why. Could be because someone just did, they had a positive thought, and then, in Hong Kong, there's a person feels better. So it could be this. It could be all kinds of things. Could be health. Could be people's financial situations. Basically, the things which are goodness in this world. They're all results of what's going on up there. So yeah, it's an indirect effect. Yes, go. Okay, go on. Yeah, what do you think of that?
You're saying it's like a ricochet effect.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So there's the direct hit, which is somewhere in the heavens, and then you have implications of that down here. Yeah. Anyway, so that is the general outline. Now, what happens now is that we just discussed in general with what we do and say and think, so we can have this positive effect. However, what we're going to see a little bit of today is that there are certain things that you can do to have a particularly positive or a particularly specific impact in the world. So that's what we just said was like the general, and now we go to like the specific, to the targeted strikes, as it were. So there are three things that we're going to talk about. One is, so I called it hacks because like there's this system where like everything you do does something, and then there's ones where you can actually like really tap into things in a very direct way. So there's three things over here which we'll try and touch on today. One is mitzvot, even just any of the 613 mitzvot. Then there's something called tefillah, which is going to have its own unique impact, and then something which is called Torah, like learning Torah, which is going to also have a unique kind of impact. So everything that we're going to be doing is going to be now having unique, interesting kinds of impact. So let's have a look. All the sources today are from the Nefesh HaChaim, different parts of the Nefesh HaChaim, who just has a lot to say about this very interesting issue. So let's read a little bit from source number one. So he said, "Me'ed she'oleh al tohar machshevet ha'adam la'asot mitzvah." From the moment that a person starts thinking about doing a mitzvah. So na'aseh rishumo lamala b'shorsho ha'elyon livnot v'lintoa kama olamot v'kochot ha'elyonim. So what happens when you start thinking about doing a mitzvah? So let's take an example. Let's think. Anyone want to volunteer a mitzvah? Think about Teshuvah Shabbat. That's an interesting one. What were you going to say? Tefillin, yeah. Tefillin's in some ways is a little easier for us because, but you could do Shmir Shabbat. So either of those. So imagine the moment. So you're on Erev, well, it's like the opposite, right? So like because you're not going to do the same one at the same time. So let's say you're on Erev Shabbos and it's just approaching sunset. So you're about to do the mitzvah. Or for example, tefillah, it's the opposite. It's a weekday. It's not Erev Shabbos, and it's in the morning, and you're about to put on the tefillah. So think about this moment before you're about to do something. When you think, which we don't always do, by the way. I often don't think about what I do before I do it. But if you do, have a thought for a minute about what you're doing. So already he said that the Nefesh Chaim says that there is some kind of rishum, some what's the word I'm looking for? Is it's like something more specific than an effect, like an impression. That's what the word I'm looking for. There's an impression made already, b'shor shoa elyon, in the upper root. So what that's a reference to is that if you look at this map in general, we said there's 4 different levels and they correspond to different parts of us. But actually, you can superimpose all of the 613 mitzvahs onto this kind of greater map of the world. And every one of the 613 has a particular site which it relates to. So when you do one of those mitzvahs, you're actually having a specific positive impact in that particular site. And that's why, it's good to do all the mitzvahs, because only with that, you're going to be able to hit all the sites in the world. And that's also the thing, is that there's no such thing as doing all of them, right? Because you would have to be a man and a woman and a Kohen and a Yisrael and a Levi and the Beis Hamikdash, yeah, exactly. So you'd have to do all things which are not possible to do together. So that's the idea of us being a team, basically. Is that only together can we actually do this thing, which is going to impact all the places which need to be impacted. But nevertheless, we have really 613 sites, if you want to get specific about it, in the world. So when you start thinking about doing the mitzvah, let's, for example, we'll just take Shabbos. So it's like it's Friday late afternoon, and the sun is starting to come down. It's approaching Shkia, and you start thinking, maybe you're in shul, or and you start thinking, oh, like Shabbos is about, so I'm about to bring in Shabbos. So when you do that, there's a site in somewhere, I don't know where it is, but in one of these realms, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, Atzilut, any of these places, which is called Shabbos, which is called Shabbat. And that kind of starts to awaken at the time that you start thinking that you're about to keep Shabbat. Um, that's what happens. And then, yeah, and then he says, Umimela mitorer umamshich gam alav or makif mea kedusha ha'elyona. So what happens the next stage? This is why I call it journeys, by the way, because this is like this whole like journey of a mitzvah. It's so interesting. So you start thinking, and then like there's an impact up there. Okay, and then what happens is the this gets activated, and you bring down upon yourself what's called an or makif, a surrounding light from that place. So it's quite interesting. So this mitzvah site in the world, it sends down a light which is surrounding you, and it even says what's kind of like the point of this in some ways, Vahu Masayato Lagomra, and that actually enables you to complete the mitzvah. So it's actually in many ways the mitzvah is investing in you. You're about to invest in the mitzvah. You're thinking you're about to do the mitzvah, and then the mitzvah therefore is like investing in you. It's giving you some of its light in order to enable you to actually go ahead and do that thing. And so then that's your basically, you imagine your next stage, so you're in the light of that mitzvah, and let's say you're still a couple of minutes before sunset, so you've now been surrounded by like the light of Shabbos, and then v'achar gomro ha-mitzvah, gomro ha-mitzvah, after the completion of the mitzvah. So let's say in this particular case, you say boy kala Shabbat malkata, whatever you want to say, I'm accepting upon myself Shabbat. I'm bringing it in. So when you do that, so the mitzvah is now you've done like the particular act which relates to the mitzvah. Of course, tefillin is a very tangible act that you can think of doing as well. Once you do that, hakadusha v'haor mistalik v'shorsho. Then you yourself enhance the light which has been kind of invested in you, and then you send that back up to its source. And then and he even says "V'zeo inyan schar olam haba," and that's the deeper idea behind reward in the world to come. So maybe we'll come back to that last point in a minute. But this is this general idea. I just thought it was like such a fascinating thing, is that every mitzvah has a story to it. Basically, every mitzvah is really it begins with you, and you think about doing it. You say, "Oh, it's coming up, mitzvah coming up," and then what already happened? You awaken this sight in the olamot called that particular mitzvah, Shabbos, tefillin, something else. What was I thinking of? Slichot. I don't know if it's one of the 613, but I just think about that. Need to plan accordingly, need to get up at the right times and go to bed at the right times. But things like that. And then when you actually go and then what you do that, and then it comes and it surrounds you, and you're kind of in this, I like this idea of this kind of microclimate of spirituality. That's here, like if you took a moment to pause in that time. By the way, I gave an example of like 2 minutes before. You could do it 1 second before, you could do it 5 minutes before, you could do it 10 minutes before. So this is actually up to us in many ways, how long we want to spend in this microclimate of spirituality. It's quite interesting. It's like in our hands in some ways. And then you do that, and then with that you go ahead and you do the mitzvah act, and then you send back that return on investment, as it were, for the site in the olamot. And basically the bottom line is, out of all of that, the world is a little bit of a better place than it was 10 minutes ago. So there's more light in the world than there was 10 minutes ago. There's a whole story behind it. Quite interesting. I don't know, any thoughts on that?
Sounds like a conversation that goes back and forth.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. It's yeah, you think a mitzvah is just you on your own. But it's actually a whole, yeah, it's a nice thing. A conversation is like a whole it's a whole relationship in many ways. Yeah.
You brought this up a couple Saturday nights ago with the recreation going on often, maybe like every even during the day.
Yeah. 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 So just remind me how that's tying in. Yeah.
There's something you were saying about things being recreated or something.
Yeah.
10 minutes or what did you say?
Yeah, no, I gave examples of different units of time, but you're right that there's this idea which we'll probably discuss more at some point as well about the creation is kind of like an ongoing, that it's not creation didn't just happen once, it's actually like ongoing renewal, which is happening in a spiritual sense. So yeah, that would go together. That would go together with this very nicely. Yeah. Um, so I think this is a really nice thing. For me, it's as I kind of alluded to earlier, it's a little bit of gives me a little bit of responsibility because I'm kind of you get into habits. I don't know, you get into habits. And you find yourself like, okay, let's get ready to tefillin. My tefillin are already on me. And I'm like it's not, not ideal. But sometimes that happens. So so when that happens, so we're missing out on a bit of an opportunity to kind of go through that. Really love that word. This go through this whole conversation with a mitzvah and have this relationship, and it's investing in you, and you're investing in it, and it's a whole thing. So in the general sense, you'll still get that kind of bottom line impact. You still will have been, have improved that particular site in the Olamot with that one of those 613 acts. So it still works in that sense. But it could have been something much more special. It could have been something much more special. So anyway, so that's an encouragement for me to think about what I do before I do it, which is good for the spiritual interactions and also good for the social interactions as well. So yeah, that's really. Anyone on Zoom wanted to mention anything on this? No. Okay, no worries. Okay. So yeah, so I think so basically this is like the first hack as it were. So like in general, when we're doing everything that we're doing, we're always having an impact, but we can have specific impacts on particular locations by doing one of the mitzvahs. So it's also like a whole new take, more than the mitzvahs are much more than the do's and don'ts, I guess. It's more it is they are moral and ethical, but there's much more than morals and ethics to mitzvahs. There's a whole thing going on. It's quite interesting. Anyway, so that's idea number one. Okay, so now tefillah, interestingly enough, we actually climb to a little bit of a higher realm in a certain sense, or a higher way of doing a tikkun. So tefillah, we'll see, actually is going to relate to all of the olamot. It's actually not just going to be a particular site, but it's going to be something which is general. So let's have a look at this. There's a few ways in which this is true, but I brought you here this piece from Ner Chaim, which I just love. We alluded to this a little bit last time, but this one I really do think about every day because it's so interesting. Okay, so it says as follows. Klal Seder HaTefillah, Nechlak Le Dalet. That there are four sections of tefillah. So he's talking about shacharit, he's talking about the morning prayer. At some point, if anyone wants, I can map these onto a siddur for you. I did that once, but everyone has different siddurim, so it's hard to generalize such a thing. But if you want, I can do. But either way, but there are four sections of the prayer service. Okay, so what's the significance of these? So Shehain, Hadalid Bechinot, Naran, V'Shor Shanashama. That these are actually going to relate to the four aspects of our own soul. We have Naran, which is Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, which we talked about already as these first three levels. And he also mentions another thing which is above that, which is called Shorish Neshama, the root of the Neshama. So with that, you have so you have your nefesh, which is relating to asiyah. You have your ruach, which is relating to yitzira. You have your neshama, which is relating to bria, and then you have something above that, which sometimes they call the chaya, or sometimes they call the shorish neshama, which means the root of the neshama. So it's the thing which is above the neshama, which is actually going to relate to the realm of atzilut. So let's see how that relates to tefillah. Four sections of tefillah, four parts of you. So let's go through them. So he says the korbanot, which is the part of the prayers which goes through the sacrifices. So that's what I mostly know as the morning brachot. Basically, that's the first thing that I know of. So there also is a korbanot to be said, and that's an important thing. But also this thing that we're about to say will also relate, even just to saying those morning brachot, the things when you get up and all that. So those aim keneged bechinat hanefesh v'olam hanefesh asiyah. So when we are doing this first part of the tefillah, what we're basically doing is we're awakening that initial part of our spirituality, which is called the nefesh, and we are even awakening the world of Asiya. So we're it's I think about it, it's like it's cool because chakras is like in the morning, right? So you're like you're waking up the day. That's kind of like what's happening here. So we're going to go stage by stage in order to wake up ourselves spiritually and to wake up the day. Upsuki de Zimra, which is the next section, which is the verses of song, let's say, which is like Ashrei and things like that. So, Upsuki Zimra, Neged Olam Haruach, Olam Hamalachim Hamashorari. So that next section relates to the Ruach, which is that next part of your spirituality, which relates to our speech. And then that also relates to the realm of the angels, which we were calling Yetzira. That's the next level up, is that of the angels.
Moshe.
Yeah.
That's in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it fits well?
It was the singing.
Exactly, yeah. So there's this whole, yeah, it's quite interesting. So in general, yeah, you see, we have the Song of the Sea every morning in this particular section. There was a guy who was in Edinburgh in Scotland not too long ago, and there was a guy who was visiting the community, and they don't really have a minion there so often, but they did have this minion, and like, where it's a little bit of a older community, so it's kind of usually a little bit dry and a lot dry and boring. And then he came up, he did Pesukei Zimmer, and he was like started like singing it. He was an actor, he's a performer, and he started like singing it. And anyway, and so yeah, so that was cool. It was like kind of the, and I said to him afterwards, I said like actually the it seems to be that you really should be singing Pesukei Zimra, not just the Song of the Sea, but in general, because it relates to the angels, and the angels we see they're mashorari and they're singing. So especially this part of the prayer is like, so it seems like he was in the right frame of mind for that thing. Anyway, that's the next stage of the tefillah, we continue moving up. So it says Kriyat Shema Birkotea, the Shema and the brachot which are around it, which is the next section, Baruch Hu onwards, basically. So Neged Heichalin Debria. This is corresponding to the sanctuaries of Bria, which is that next world up. Kiyadua Olam Neshamot. As everyone knows, that's the world of the Neshamot. So I don't know if everyone knows that, but he thinks that everyone Kiyadua. That's why everyone knows. Everyone knows this thing.
You say Kadosh, Kodesh, Kadosh,
Ah. Yeah, go on. What are you thinking about that?
Say that in there. That's the Malachim saying that too.
Nice. So, well, that's actually good point. Good point. Maybe we'll even come back to Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh in a minute because there's a very special thing which happens when we do that in the Kedusha part of the Amida. But you're right. You already are kind of relating to that at that stage. Good points. So anyway, so when you're saying the Shema, so if you think about it, what we're awakening is our own neshama, which is our own mind, and also the world of the neshamot, which corresponds to it. And then he says, Mi birka kriyat shema ad ha'amida. So when you are moving towards the Amida, the standing prayer, the Shemona Esrei, when you're moving towards that, so what's going to be happening at that stage? Yichlol v'ya'ale kol hanaran, the Bria Yitzira, Bria Yitzira Asiya, there's lots of acronyms here. V'naran Shelo, Imahem. So you basically at this stage you're taking everything that you got, you're putting it together. You're taking all the worlds of Asiya, Yetzira, Bria, that which you've been building up until now. You're taking your Naran, your Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, all of your soul that we're usually interacting with. You're taking that all together, Imahem, together. L'cholalam yachad b'shoresh haneshama, b'shoresh haknisia shel klal neshamot Yisrael yachad. And what you do is you send that up. You're sending all that up to what on a personal level is our shorish neshama, that or chaya, that higher level of our own soul, and then with that, this place which he calls the gathering of all the neshamas of Klal Yisrael together, all of the souls of the Jewish people. So that's a reference to Atzilut, because it's in a place in Atzilut where we say like, oh, yeah, we're all one. So there's a place. We usually mean that kind of philosophically, like we're all in this together. But there's a place in the spiritual universes where we really are all one. We actually are united as if one entity. That's called Knesset Yisrael. That's the in Atzilut.
Yachidah.
So that's even so I don't really I don't know the answer to that. Brian's bringing in Yechidah, which is there is a higher level of the soul as well called Yechidah. I don't really know. The Nefesh Chaim doesn't talk about it, so I don't really know anything about it. And I don't know how it would relate to this because we seem to have done the work that we need to do by just accessing the higher. So I don't really know. There is, as I said, he says there's a fifth level, so it is, but I just don't really know much about it. But
It's the toughest one at sea.
I guess so. Yeah, yeah. So even with your Chaya, you're already entering the realm of Atsilut. You're entering a part of Atsilut over there. So basically, what's happening over there? Did he say it? Yeah. So basically, what's happening is this is why I really love this one, is that you can really kind of get into it. You can thinking about awakening myself and like bring it in what's it called like building the day. Like this is like a thing that you can do, and you build like building the world for the day ahead. And this is something which I connect to. So I really like to do that. And it's kind of like you can kind of visualize it quite easily as well. Because like I think the mitzvah thing is I do like that a lot, but I also don't know like which part is one of the 613 and things like that. So it's a little bit harder. This one, like Asiya, Yetzira, Priya, Tzilat. Oh, I can do that. And so it's quite interesting that the world is tefillah is again, it is certainly a conversation with God. That's true. But it's also much more. It's also again this journey. The tefillah is a journey through yourself every single morning, and it's a journey through the world. It's the most interesting tour that you get, and it's for free as well. As the tour guides are all going out of business, unfortunately, these days in Israel because they don't get enough business. So I don't mean to put them out of business anymore, but you can get a free tour of the spiritual universes every single day, actually, which is quite interesting. I just come back to something that Jay mentioned. Jay mentioned the Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. This is another place. There's a few different places where you see that tefillah is not just any old mitzvah, but it actually is something which kind of corresponds to the whole system. Is that when you'd say in the Kedusha prayer, Kadosh, 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 what you're actually doing is you're elevating everything. So the first Kadosh is elevating Asiya up to Yetzirah. And then the second one is elevating Yetzirah up to Bria. And then the third one is elevating Bria right up to Atzilut. So also it's all this thing about bringing everything up. So there's a lot of it in our hands, actually. We kind of think that we come into the world and we're like, the world is like a context and we're like kind of just going about our day within that context. We actually have a big impact on the world around us in that sense. So we're not just kind of passive observers of the world around us. We're like very involved in its upkeep and things like that. Interesting. Yeah, Shari. Oh, so you're just on mute.
All right. Are there infinite worlds or is there finite worlds? Because in the level of soul, I can't imagine it being finite. So when you talk about levels, how many,
Yeah, great question. Great question. So Shari was asking, are there finite levels of worlds? Also what about souls? We've talked about a few, but are there more? Brian already mentioned another one, at least in terms of the soul, levels of the soul.
And the concept of infinite.
Yeah.
That's
So we're gonna actually see the next part will relate to your question a little bit as well. So you're already ahead of your time. You're thinking forwards and coming up with the next source before the next source has even done so, Shari. But basically so it's an interesting question. So the short answer is that the bottom line is that there are a finite number of, your soul, even though it is relative to this world, is kind of like infinite because it goes beyond the limitations of this world. But in an absolute sense, it is finite because there are, 5 levels to your soul. And maybe the first 3 of them are the ones we're usually dealing with. To some extent, we sometimes deal with the fourth. Tefillah, we found a way to tap into it. And the fifth one, I don't even know. But that is basically the totality. In terms of the worlds, so generally we're dealing with 4. There is another one above that, which is called Adam Kadmon. These Sfarim don't usually talk about it so much. I think it's more for something more esoteric than the things that I learn. And there are different things beyond it which we'll see alluded to in the next part. However, ultimately, at least in an absolute sense, there is still a limit. There is still a limit, even though again, relatively, we can call it infinite because it's far beyond the limitations of anything that we're used to defining. However, in an absolute sense, it is actually finite. the only thing which is infinite is God himself. And that's so there is a place in some ways where God is bigger than even these unbelievable spiritual worlds that we're talking about. There is a place where those stop and God doesn't stop, as it were. And God is really infinite. We'll see the word Ein Sof coming in there in infinity relating to God. So let's lead on to this last part. So learning Torah, I think in many ways is one of in some ways for me, it's kind of like the least intuitive one to fit into this whole system. It's true that you're gaining knowledge, I guess you could say, but other than that, it's a little hard to see productivity in Torah. I think just for me, I think if you do a mitzvah, okay, to do tzedakah, something happens. Okay, there's more, but do you feel okay? I asked God for something, so you can see, even without going into the depths. Without going into the depths, it's a little bit hard to see what Torah could be doing. When we do go into the depths, we find that Torah is the most breathtaking thing of all, actually. So let's have a look at that. So Nefesh Chaim says as follows. He says, "HaTorah Kadosha sheshorsha elyon hanelam hu lamala mala gam me'atzilut kodsho yitbarach." The upper root of the Torah is actually even above Atzilut. So all the realm which was purely godly, the root of the Torah is even above that. So just relating to Shari's point already, see there's something above that, something. So it does go beyond Atzilut, even if it's not objectively infinite, but nevertheless, so you have something even above Atzilut, which is called the Torah, which is very interesting. It says, "Kanal v'kuchabrichu v'araita kulachad," because in some way, God and the Torah are kind of united with one another. So it has to be that the Torah is something which is going to go beyond, in as much we discuss it, God goes beyond. So the Torah is something which is going to go beyond even the realm of Atzilut. So that's right. So, i.e., above the whole system that we've just discussed, Torah is above that. Ubilti, excuse me, he hanefesh v'achiyut v'nehiro v'shorsha da'almin kulo. And the Torah, in being above, is actually he calls it the nefesh, like the soul, and the life force, and the light, and the roots behind all of the worlds. So basically, that's a very interesting idea, is that the people have maybe come across this phrase of Istakel ba'araito bara alma, that God looked into the Torah and created the world. So what's kind of happening there is if you can, again, the imagery is a metaphor, but it can be helpful, is that you have God who's kind of like shining his light through something called the Torah, and out of that comes everything as we know it. So in that sense, the Torah is kind of like the root of existence, even the spiritual existence. It's kind of like the root of that. So the life of the world in that sense is coming ultimately from God, but it's coming through the Torah, actually. So with that, ubilti shifat ora bahem kol rega mamash laha'ir lachayotam ulekaimam. And if it wasn't for the light of the Torah constantly coming into this world, hayu chozrin kulan letovavo mamash, then everything would just go back to nothingness. Because if you think about it, if you take just as with a human being, if you were to extract the soul from the human being, there would be nothing left. So too, if you were to extract that this is the soul of the world, this is the thing which is giving the world its life. So if you were to take the Torah away for a minute, then there's no life. So the world would just go to non-existence. It's a little bit also, by the way, I think we have a new helpful metaphor for this or analogy for this in modern times, which is coding, like software engineering, where you have basically something which is like letters, also numbers, which is the root of existences. You have someone, they write code, and then out of that is a reality. Something comes out of it. So the Torah is a little bit like the Torah is kind of like the source code for the world. Yeah. Question answer.
So Isaac, does that mean that the Torah was already there? God used the Torah to create the world, and then at a later stage shared it with us.
Good. So, yeah, perfect question. So that's going to bring us on. I think that's going to bring us on to the next point. So let's continue that train of thought. The question was, God was creating the world via the Torah, and then how do we fit into that? So let's see. So he said, "Ulazot." Yeah, everyone's on it today. Ulazot ikar chiyutam v'oram v'kiyumam shela olamot kulam. So therefore, all of the life and the light in the world, and just the existence and he says olamot, not just this world here, but even the spiritual world. al nachon, that is being maintained properly. Hu rak kashanachnu oskim ba karoi. That is only if we are actually learning Torah in the proper way. So basically, what happens is this whole thing. So we just described that Torah is very big and impressive, and it's actually something which is even above the whole system, and it's the source code. But then what happened at a certain point, basically Mount Sinai, is that God said, this thing, which is the life of the world, which basically the world, it's like the power generator for the whole world, and everything is dependent on it. Okay, now I give it to you. And you have to you're in charge of the upkeep, which is like a little, a kind of a crazy thing.
That's the deist philosophy, right? That Albert Einstein tapped into that one where it's like God is just a clockmaker, and we just do everything else.
So if you were to isolate that part of it itself, it would sound a little bit like that. In that if God were to have at that stage completely departed and no longer have an involvement in the world, then it would sound a bit like that. However, this is just one factor. The factor of the world keeping going, even though it's quite a big factor, right, is dependent on us. But there is still, for at the end of the day, let's say, for example, who decides that we wake up in the morning? So ultimately, at the end of the day, even God is still putting into us along the way and enabling us to do the upkeep. So it's a very healthy, I mean, like quite like a good relationship in many ways that we gives us this responsibility, but then he also gives us all the tools that we need in order to actually fulfill that responsibility. It's the opposite of what they did in Egypt, right? Meaning in ancient Egypt, where they gave them a task and they said, we're not giving you materials for the task. That's what they did. That was the biggest torture that they did. They said it made people basically lose hope entirely. So this is the opposite of that. It's like it gives us a big task and gives us everything that we need in order to do that task. So that's it. It's also a few other things which are going on as well. So we do have God who's actually constantly involved in the world, nevertheless, but it's like a partnership now. So on the one hand, he's doing lots and lots of things for the world, and on the other hand, we are a partner. We are a necessary partner in the upkeep and the life and the light of the world.
Are you saying that's the meaning of creation? Why we were created was to be a partner?
Yeah, basically, yeah. Meaning the ultimate reason why we were created was that that God should be able to give us good. But he saw that the best way to receive good is to work for it. And so this was kind of the way that this happened, is that he said, you're gonna work together with me, as it were, so to speak, and then you're gonna earn it for yourself. It's gonna be much more meaningful for you, and you're gonna be the people who create the good instead of just receiving a good. You're gonna actually create it yourself, and that's basically what maybe we'll come back to this as we finish. So as we were just saying, there's this whole idea in general of the Tikkun Olam. There's a big wide world out there, and we have the ability to affect it for the good. We have the ability to make the world a better place with all our, actions and speech and thoughts, but also with particular mitzvahs, hitting particular sites, also with prayer, which is kind of, a journey through all the spiritual worlds and even through ourselves, kind of awakening the whole system. And then with Torah, which is giving light to the system itself. So you see, like tefillah is like affecting the whole system from within the system. It's a little bit like I was thinking also like, you have the you say, let's say for example, like each mitzvah, I like soccer, right? So each mitzvah would be like a player on the team. So everyone's doing their job. And then you have like tefillah, which is like the manager, which is like, they're affecting everything which is going on because they're doing the tactics and whatever. And then you have like Torah in a little bit is in some ways is like the owner. They're the one who decides if the club is going to exist or not. And so like they're actually even creating the context. And so we're doing all of this for the world. We're acting within the world in specific ways and in general ways, and we're even acting, as it were, upon the world itself. We're creating our own context. And as we said, like the power generator or the source code and all that stuff. And we have all these amazing mechanisms to do it. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, is what we're here for is really to bring light into the world. And that's something we can do with our actions, with our mitzvahs, with our prayers, with our learning. It's something which is just like relates to the parsha. Is ki karov elecha davar ma'od, that all these big jobs, they seem like very big and scary, but it's actually very close to it. It's something that we all have the ability to do. So it's all of us, no matter how we're doing in life, no matter how we're feeling in a certain day, we all have the ability to bring light into the world. So that's our thoughts for the evening. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is why, like Torah is the ultimate. That's why if we have an opportunity to learn Torah, that we do that over